Hey, Three Crosses family, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Pastor AJ. I oversee life groups and discipleship. And today we are celebrating new life. We're going to be talking about the baptism Sunday that we saw and witnessed. And we're going to be looking at Isaiah chapter 6. Before we get into our conversation today, we want to tell you about what's going on here at Three Crosses. And so first, we'd love for you to fill out our podcast survey by going to threecrosses.church/podcast. Tell us who you are, where you're listening from, and you can redeem a free drink at Neighborhood Coffee. Furthermore, we have life group nights coming up. You can check out more information at threecrosses.church/life group nights. We're going to have the option of going through our Rooted curriculum, which goes through the 7 rhythms of Christian discipleship. If you haven't gone through Rooted, we'd encourage you to do that. Or you can follow along this upcoming Sunday sermon series all the way throughout November 12th. And so every Wednesday night, 6:30 to 8 p.m. here at the Three Crosses campus. Find out more on our website. We have an awesome conversation in store for you on Isaiah chapter 6. And so with that, let's go deeper. Back for another conversation in the podcast studio. Pastor Danny, what a Celebrate New Life Sunday that was.
What a Sunday that was.
How many baptisms are on the sign-up sheet?
Well, yeah,
into this?
We've going into the weekend. We've got 46 signed up, and we haven't closed the signups yet. So we're excited to see what the Lord brings as it comes together.
Look at that. That's amazing. And one of the things I love about the podcast on Celebrate New Life Sundays is you have a shortened time on stage to share the message.
I do. And this is a huge text of the scripture for a short amount of time.
So we get to unpack it all right here. Isaiah chapter 6. If you're following along, it's a great passage in a great book. And so, yeah, we're jumping right into Isaiah chapter 6. I'll begin with the first couple words and ask the context question. So it begins by saying, in the year that King Uzziah died. So help us zoom out just with that bit of information, right? This is going to be a slow podcast, but King Uzziah, who is King Uzziah? How does that help us identify what's going on in the book of Isaiah? And maybe zoom out a little bit further. What is even the book of Isaiah about? What are some of the things we should know about Isaiah going into this passage?
Yeah, so in the year of King Uzziah's reign, I think, first of all, that's a reminder that this is a historical book. This is not some like apocalyptic vision that could happen anywhere. This is something that happened at a specific point of time with a real person. And so as we learn about this prophet Isaiah, we found out a number of things. One, we find out, okay, this is a prophet from the 8th century BC. King Uzziah reigned and died in the 8th century BC. We find out that this is a prophet to the southern kingdom of Israel, where King Uzziah was a king. And so we kind of get this idea of like, okay, here's the scope. This is in God's history in this season. This is the king who was reigning in this season. So we kind of get this idea of the setting, the tone. And you kind of get, obviously we'll see a little bit more of this when we get into the text itself of what Isaiah is convicted about his people. But this is a season in the 700s where we start to see exile begin to happen, right? So the northern kingdom of Israel falls in the 8th century BC, 722, right? That's when the northern kingdom falls. Southern kingdom doesn't fall until about 150 years later, or 110 years later. But we're starting to sense we're at the part of God's history where a lot of the prophets were in the 8th century warning the church, you've got to change your ways, right? Jonah's an 8th century prophet. I think Amos is an 8th century prophet. I might be wrong. Isaiah is an 8th century prophet. Like there's a lot of these prophets who are saying, hey, judgment's coming, right? It's time to repent. And obviously if you study the church history, you realize they didn't. But this is the season we're in. So when we follow the whole book of Isaiah, you see these ebbs and flows of like God's bringing judgment. He's eventually going to redeem you, but God's bringing judgment, but he's going to redeem you. So you get all of that just by recognizing where's the place and time this book is happening.
Yeah, and if you look at the opening words of the book of Isaiah, it's a book that spans across a pretty good period of time. So it starts with the vision concerning Judah and Jerusalem that Isaiah, son of Amos, saw during the reigns of Uzziah, who had just died, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. So it's a quite a long span there. And if you're interested in learning more about Uzziah specifically, you go to 2 Chronicles 26.
Look at
2
that.
Chronicles 26. I spent time building a little profile of Uzziah.
Oh, cool. Let's hear it.
King at 16 years old. So 16-year-old king.
Yeah,
That's
wow.
pretty crazy.
I've got some 16-year-olds in my house. That's crazy.
52 years of reigning. 52 years.
Wow. So he started at 16?
Started at 16.
And he reigned until he died?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He had a lot of victories. So there was like this almost revival of the military power of Jerusalem. So a lot of fortifications of towers, armies, cisterns. It says that he built machinery that helped launch arrows. So that's pretty cool.
Wow. Okay.
But then it ends in a tragic turn of events. In 2 Chronicles 26, it says, when he was strong, he grew proud to his destruction.
Oh man, I was hoping it was like he finished real strong, and now it's Isaiah saying like, "Hey, let's keep it going."
Yeah,
that's
and
too
so
bad.
he says he entered the temple of the Lord to burn incense on the altar of incense, which was a role for the priests.
Not his job.
And then he ended up a leper for the rest of his life until he died.
So
it's kind of a not even a rags to riches story. It's like a powerful, but then pride comes before the fall story, I guess.
Well, it's interesting because you're talking about like Hezekiah. Hezekiah had a bit of a story arc too, where it's like he was sick and then he came to the Lord and asked for healing. God healed him. God gave him time. And like there's this cycle of like, it's not too late. You can still turn to the Lord, but then people turn away from the Lord. So you kind of see as the king goes, so the people go.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just interesting. Yeah, this guy reigned for 52 years, and the year that he died, Isaiah gets this call. And so it's like, okay, every time you get this call, it's like, maybe now we can finally fix this place, right? This guy didn't end well. We got a new horizon in front of us. Will the people listen to the message? We hope so.
Yeah. Ebbs and flows.
Ebbs and
The
flows.
Book of Kings.
And the book of Isaiah. I feel like that's how
Yeah.
I would describe Isaiah. If you ever read Isaiah, it's like, okay, and then okay, and then okay, and then okay. It just feels like you're like going up and down, riding with the tide.
Yeah. And Isaiah 6 is really important because there's a very specific scene that we talked about on Sunday. And so let's break down that scene that happens to Isaiah. In the year that King Uzziah died, it says, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces. With 2 they covered their feet. And with 2 they were flying. So a lot of imagery going on here. A lot of throwbacks into some previous podcasts that we had on the book of Revelation. You see this throne room scene. You get a whole bunch of the seraphim language, all these angelic spiritual creatures that are around the throne. And so help us understand what is going on with the 6-winged creatures, the seraphim. What importance does that draw out in this initial interaction where he sees the Lord high and exalted? And I'm imagining the maybe not skeptic, but that person out there that says oftentimes, well, if God would only reveal himself like this, then maybe things would change. But hey, I've been a Christian for a while. I don't think I've ever seen the Lord like this in this state before. What would you say to somebody that's like wrestling with, man, if only I could see God like this?
Then things would change in their own life.
Change, yeah.
I mean, I do think on one hand, you come face to face in an encounter with the living God, and it is a remarkable thing. It changes you in some way. And so I think part of that's where Isaiah is going, is that he was changed by this experience. I think part of him sharing this experience does the same thing as the kind of the timestamp with Uzziah's death. He's saying, I went to a real place, right? This is, if we study like Revelation or we look back at other apocalyptic books, like Isaiah's not an apocalyptic book, so this kind of feels out of place. But when you look at these apocalyptic books, you get the same image of what the throne room of God looks like. And so this is not merely him having a fantastic vision, it could be anything. It's just these images and pictures. He went and visited a place in a vision, and this place was a real place in time. I mean, God exists outside of time, but in time where he goes and visits the throne room of God. And there's a consistency with like the vision in Revelation 1 or 3 or 5, wherever it is, and the vision here of a throne, God on that throne, a glorious God on that throne, surrounded by attendants, these creatures that are just created to bring him worship, who have this reverence and fear as they cover themselves and fly in place, but still proclaim glory. It's a remarkable thing. And so on one hand, yes, if any of us were in that place, it would be transformative. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know what the answer to the question is. Like, well, why doesn't God just show up physically to all of us? I think, the answer I would have to that would be the parable that Jesus gave when he talked about the person who dies and goes to hell. And he's like, hey, I just want to go back and warn my brother. And Jesus is like, well, he has the prophets, right? Let him listen to the prophets and Moses. And he's like, no. He wouldn't listen to Moses and the prophets. But if I rose from the dead and I went and told him, he definitely would listen to me. And Jesus says poignantly, if he didn't listen to Moses and the prophets, he won't listen if somebody rises from the dead. So he's talking about his own death and resurrection. But really what Jesus is also saying is like, listen, even if God himself came to earth, visited this place, died for the sins of the people, rose to new life, and then appeared to you, you still wouldn't believe. Like that doesn't change anything. Like the Spirit gives you eyes to see, but the same Spirit who gives you eyes to see whether you're in the throne room of God or you're just sitting in a church on a Sunday morning, you hear a message. Transformation happens when the Spirit opens your eyes. So it's not, if you're like, well, if I just saw a little bit more, then I'd believe. I mean, we all know people who have seen God's miracles over and over again and they still don't believe. So I don't think it's as binary as that, but I would say it's got to be a remarkable thing to be in the presence of God.
Yeah. And it's fascinating. If I can remember the Revelation conversation on this, Revelation chapter 1 outlines a similar scene where things are happening, and also in 4. And I think what we were commenting on that passage was how it feels like it says, in the midst of the lampstands, one like a son of man, clothed with a long robe and with a golden sash. So it feels like there's one like the Son of Man in the midst of all this. And it's like, wow, this is language of Jesus appearing in a similar fashion. So it's like, hey, in the person of Jesus, this is the revelation that we've been given. And once you find out who Jesus really is, then you have an incredible experience with him. So
yeah, and it's interesting. You have the gloriousness of God, especially in the Old Testament, where it's like you stand in his presence and you're like, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Then you have Jesus, who himself condescends to join us, and he takes off all of that gloriousness to put on human flesh. And when we approach him, we don't die. We encounter God face to face. And so people had these powerful encounters with Jesus that changed them forever. And so I think one of the things that we need to recognize is it's not merely the gloriousness of God that gives us the remarkable transformative connection. It's the person and being of God himself, the deity of God, the glory of God in his person. So even if all the train is gone, the attendance is gone, the weight is gone, the radiance is gone, and God threw all that away and just put on flesh and bones like ours and stood face to face, yeah, it wouldn't be as terrifying probably, but you would have a divine encounter even if all that pomp and circumstance was gone.
Well, let's talk about some of the words that you just threw out there with glory and, what they're singing, because it says that these creatures that are six-winged and covering each other's faces, they were calling to one another. And here's the song: holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. And so again, throwback to Revelation 4, 6-8, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. It seems like a common song that gets sung. And yet, just like songs today, sometimes we go and sing them and don't even think about the lyrics. And so I'm looking at the lyrics here, and I'm identifying a lot of what they call Christianese terms, like holy, Lord Almighty, glory, all these words that maybe are worth spending some time to talk about. So could you walk us through those terms? Holy, 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 Lord Almighty, full of his glory. And how might this scene of the seraphim worshiping the Lord on his throne, how might this scene inform the way we ought to continue to worship even today?
The holiness of God, holy is a word that it really, I think, best can be translated like other, like he's not like us, he's something else. And so he's set apart is the way that we put it too. So this idea, whether it's like a person is set apart or an object is set apart, right? Like even this money, we talked about finances a few weeks ago, like we set apart this portion of money, it becomes holy. It's set apart for God's work. And so God is set apart. He's other from everything. And yet at the same time, we see the flip side of that though he is set apart, other, more weighty, bigger, more gigantic, more glorious than anything else, he also, right, he was and is to come in that one passage. So like he expands through all space and time. Here it's really interesting. The whole earth is filled with his glory. And so even though Isaiah is in a spot where God is seen as immensely glorious, like he's weighty, mighty, heavy, terrifying, like almost imagine like standing face to face with a tsunami and you're like, I'm going to die, right? That's how he feels. Or a grizzly bear or something, right? Or a mountain that's crashing down into you, like a lava eruption or whatever. He's standing face to face with the gloriousness of our God. And we see that the gloriousness of God fills that room. The train of his robe fills the temple with glory, but then they cry out, the whole earth is filled with his glory. So even though he's in a specific space and time, those two throne room images tell us that God's glory also extends throughout space. His whole earth is filled with his glory, and throughout time. He was and is to come. And so God's glory is not merely localized in this room, it's just experienced most poignantly in this room, but the glory of our Lord expands throughout all of creation. And so that's like what the author of Romans says, is the heavens declare the glory of God, that his gloriousness can be seen in all that he has made, and so that men are without excuse. Even if you don't ever stand face to face with God, you've seen his glory because you've seen the sunset, you've seen an ant, you've seen a bumblebee, you've seen a human, you've seen a baby take its first breath, like you've seen the glory of the Lord in his creation.
It's awesome that they're singing this as well, and we see that it gets sung later in Revelation, and so it's like an ongoing song that these creatures are having around the throne. And even in Revelation, it triggers all sorts of types of worship and postures of reverence and everything that you can imagine. So I'm wondering that follow-up question of just how should that change us today? How should it change us knowing that there are creatures that are designated to sing this song constantly? Because I feel like when we sing in church, maybe we're not tapping into that, or maybe there's some disconnect between what's going on up there and what's going on down here.
Yeah, on one hand, there's a connection. So like when we sing in worship in church, we are joining with the saints around the world, the saints throughout time, and we're joining with the heavenly creatures that constantly are singing out. So that's absolutely true, that there's something beautiful that happens when we recognize that what we are doing is joining with something that's already happening. At the same time, I would say an alternate explanation is true, which in the same way that the entire earth is filled with God's glory all the time, but in this throne room moment, in this space and time, Isaiah becomes acutely aware of it. I would say at the same time, the worshipfulness of God, or the worship of God, is happening all the time. And there are moments where we become aware of it. And so in the same way that you can see the glory of God even in your own body, you can live a life of worship without singing, right? There's a way to live a life of worshipfulness and join in with that song, so to speak, without singing, without lyrics, without being in church, but just living your life in such a way that you're attuned to the worship that God is receiving at all times. And so I do think there is something where this room, this throne room, gives us a glimpse of something glorious and weighty and beautiful that also is constantly and continuously happening in every time and space throughout human history. And so there's something beautiful about realizing, though, even though I'm not in that throne room, I can still see that God is glorious. Even though I'm not in that throne room, even though I'm not in church worshiping, I'm still worshiping God as I'm at work right now. And there's just something beautiful about the constancy of this song throughout creation that never changes. I think back to the Revelation series, though, and at the same time think of that chapter where they sing a new song. Yep. And it's like, man, it also is this like forward look to, like, at one hand, even though God's glory is portable in the sense that it's continuous in all dimensions, and God's worship is portable in the sense that it's happening and continuing in all dimensions and all time, there is something that is time bound to this kingdom, this world, where on the other side of eternity, God is still glorious, God is still worshiped, but something changes in the character and nature of that worship and how we received it, or the song that we sing. And so it's interesting to wonder, what would that be like? How is worship of our glorious God unique in this time and space, because it changes on the other side of eternity?
I think that's an awesome question to ask, because now you're thinking about, like, what context am I in? How is the Lord showing up in this season of life? And now it's just this ongoing journey with worship. And so we've talked about the holiness of God, the set apartness, the Lord Almighty, and then the earth being full of his glory. You might be thinking, wow, this is an awesome passage. I wonder how Isaiah is going to react.
I mean, you kind of feel like you think of where the disciples are with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration, and they're like, this is amazing.
This is epic, guys.
Like, we want to be here forever. Can we pitch our tents here and like live in this place? Like, let's spend the night. Like, let's not go home today. Right. They love it.
And yet
Isaiah doesn't seem to love it in the same way. Yeah.
Because he has a very interesting experience where in verse 4, at the sound of their voices, of the creatures singing this worship song, the doorposts and the thresholds shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. Isaiah goes on to say, woe to me! I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. Now, what stands out to me about this passage in verse 4 particularly, of the temple being filled with smoke, this motif of smoke descending and the Lord's presence coming to his people. So you think about Mount Sinai in Exodus 19, where Mount Sinai is wrapped in smoke and God is visiting his people, and they're terrified. They don't want to go up there, and they're just like, Moses, you go. And you think of all the way in Revelation 15 again, like no one can enter the sanctuary until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were finished, because the sanctuary was filled with smoke from the glory of God. So God's glory is on full display. It's descended upon the temple. Help us unpack Isaiah's response here. Woe to me, I am ruined. And then talking about the cleanliness of his lips and the lips of his peers.
Yeah. I mean, I think of this in a super spiritual way and a super not spiritual way. Like, I think I'll start with the non-spiritual way. I imagine, right, this is going to be a lesser to the greater type of example, but every once in a while you get an opportunity maybe in life to connect with someone who's like accomplished great things. So I remember one time going to a Warriors game and getting to go down courtside during warm-ups. And it's like, I remember watching Kevin Durant warming up, and I'm like, dude, this guy is like, this is an other type of human being. Like, he's like 6'7", like his wingspan is like 7'2" or something. Like, he's just built for basketball. You see a LeBron James and like get across the court so quickly at his age and with his size and how high he gets off the ground. And it's just like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. You see a human, right? Or whatever, you run into somebody who's been wildly successful, whatever it is, and you're like listening to them lecture. There's something that might come into your brain when you're watching this, and you think like, what am I even doing with my life, right? It's like, I'm like playing pickup basketball with my buddies. Like I am nothing, right? And so it's like, I want to make sure that we know that like the difference between me and Steph Curry is very great. But the difference between me and Steph Curry is much closer than the difference between me and the Lord, right? And so I would have to imagine how much more would Isaiah be in the spot where he sees God, who is not just great, but perfect, like great with a capital G. Mm-hmm. And on one hand, at a very non-spiritual level, just be like, oh my gosh, like I am nothing. Like I'm like a flea. Like this, there's that. Mm-hmm. There's also just that elemental aspect of like the weightiness, gloriousness, bigness of God. Like you stand in front of a tsunami, you stand in front of a grizzly bear, right? And it's like, I'm dead. Like if this thing decides to kill me, I cannot fight back. I'm dead, right? And then with this at a more spiritual level, and I think this is a plus and a minus for Isaiah. Isaiah becomes acutely aware that like he has no right to stand in the presence of God, right? It just feels like, like, I don't know, imagine that you're like someone who's doing terrible things in your social life, and then you get an award at work for being of upstanding character, and you're like sitting up there thinking like, I'm a total phony. Like I shouldn't be getting this award. Like if they really knew who I really was. And so I think there is something where Isaiah's standing before God and he's like, either I'm about to die, this is so scary, or, oh my goodness, like God is so big, I'm so small, or becomes acutely aware of like, okay, this God should kill me because like what am I doing with my life? Like he says, I'm of unclean lips. I live among a people of unclean lips. It's like, listen, I'm a sinner. I live in a community of sinners. Like this God, I'm sure knows me. I'm about to die because it's like, there's no reason that if I'm summoned into this room, it's only because he's going to say, I've been watching you live. It's time for you to die. You've made a mess of this life of yours, And so I think there is like this cut to the heart that I think obviously that's not good. You shouldn't be a wild sinner. at the same time, I think what's beneficial is I would imagine there's a lot of people, I would think it would be hard in front of God, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. There's just people that I've met, narcissistic type people who it's like, they're like, oh man, God's going to be so excited to meet me, or like, maybe they're scared, but they're like, I'm just going to prove to this God that I got it together. And he understands like, yeah, I made some mistakes, but we all make mistakes, like I hear people talk that way all the time. So I do think the redemptive silver lining on the cloud of Isaiah's dark experience is he becomes aware that like, I am a sinner. Like, I don't deserve to be in this room. Like you got the wrong guy. So on one hand, he doesn't deserve to be in that room. He is a sinner and absolutely God should kill him. But on the other hand, there is something beautiful when someone's like willing to admit that like, if God's going to work with anyone, he's going to work with a guy like this, who's like, at least he's being honest.
Mm-hmm. I have so many more questions after that with the follow-up, because if God wants to be with his people and yet his people are full of sin, it seems like a problem. How did they resolve that situation? Because you see God interacting with his people in the Old Testament. So if, for people that may not be familiar with the Bible, like how did that situation that tension get resolved?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's we were talking today about our Christmas series that we're putting together. Austin Payne's putting a draft of an Advent series for us. And there was a topic that was like, God is with us in our sin.
Yeah.
And AJ, you were just like, I just don't feel comfortable with that. Cause it's like, it's not like when we're sinning, God's like, oh, I'm right there with you. Right, it's like, that's not what we're trying to communicate. And yet there's this tension of like, God, the character and nature of our God, he draws near to us even in times of sin. And sometimes he draws near to us in judgment or in discipline, rebuke. We see the posture of God towards us in our sin, though, is one where he wants to be a giver of mercy and grace. And so this is the whole like fascination with the graciousness of God in the New Testament, where it's like, when we were still sinners, Christ died for us. You can almost hear like Paul scratching his head. Like, I mean, sometimes for a godly person, someone might possibly dare to die, but while we were still sinners, he came for us. And it's like the story of the prodigal son, like all of these stories, or even like the Good Samaritan, where it's like, while we were dead on the side of the road and we didn't deserve God to come to us, he came and he bandaged us up and he paid for our healing and he checked in on it. Like, what kind of God does this? So I do think there is something about the nature of God that I think is seen throughout Scripture. And yet I would think the natural inclination of the human heart is to think, I'm messed up. There's no way God's going to use me. There's no way God's going to discard me. Like, he should find a real good person, not me. And so Isaiah is about to encounter kind of the tension of, well, God is a holy God and demands righteousness, and yet somehow finds a way to stay connected with Isaiah, though he is truly a sinful person who doesn't deserve to be in the presence of God.
I also find it fascinating that Isaiah doesn't only refer to himself, but he also recognizes that he lives among a people of unclean lips as well. And if you were wondering, what was Isaiah 1-5 about? This is what it's about how the population surrounding Isaiah, the kingdom of Judah, even references to the kingdom of Israel, have just gone off the rails. Like, he's calling people slanderers, all sorts of things, Therefore, the Lord Almighty, the Mighty One, declares, I will vent my wrath on my foes and avenge myself on my enemies. I will turn my hand against you. I will thoroughly purge away your dross, remove all your impurities. All these different things, Isaiah 1-5. It is powerful.
Well, and it's interesting because I wonder if Isaiah, what he's saying is true. It has multiple meanings. I do see that as we walk through his book, we see that God has a different view even on the issue than Isaiah does. And so I would guess, just based on what he said so far and how he expresses it, is that he feels like the problem with people's lips is that they're using them to do bad stuff. Right? So it's like you're slandering folks, you're telling lies, all these things that your lips shouldn't be doing. And it's like, we are not righteous at all. When God brings teaching to the people in Isaiah's day based on the lips, it's stuff like, you honor me with your lips, but your heart is far from me. Or, I don't want your worship anymore. Like you're fasting, you're praying. It's like, I don't even listen to it because like your hearts aren't in the right place. And when you go out and live, it's like you abandon the poor, you exploit the working, like all these things where he's like, listen, if you want to do something spiritual, if you want to fast, like go do something spiritual, like release the captives and free the bonds of the oppressed and all these things. And so it's interesting. I think Isaiah is seeing like, man, we tell dirty jokes and we like make fun of people and like we lie like all the time. And like, we just live in a real bad culture. And God's like, honestly, it's like the thing that I hate more about what you do with your lips is you're praising me when you don't mean it in your heart. So it's interesting. God is always bringing things back to the heart, where we tend to see the behavior. He's like, let me just talk about the heart this behavior is coming from.
So we have the Lord Almighty, holy, 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 full of his glory. The earth is full of his glory.
God is glorious.
Yes,
Isaiah
God is glorious.
is not.
Isaiah is not. Woe to me. I am ruined. I'm a man of unclean lips. I live among a people of unclean lips. And yet he has seen the King, the Lord Almighty. So what happens in the narrative? Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with tongs from the altar. With it, he touched my mouth and said, see, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away and your sin atoned for. A very interesting scene. The only time we see burning coals appear anywhere, Ezekiel 10, another book that illustrates the vision of the throne room, is just a portable throne room. It says, go in among the whirling wheels underneath the cherubim, fill your hands with burning coals from between the cherubim. So apparently that's a place where burning coals were, between the cherubim. And this man sprinkled it across the nation, scattered them over the city as a sign of judgment. So the same thing happens in Revelation, where all of a sudden you get these burning coals and you see these angels pouring out, and presumably, again, judgment. And yet the same tools in Ezekiel used for judgment here get taken by the seraphim, touch the mouth, and all of a sudden your guilt is taken away and your sins are atoned for. So how did this encounter with this burning coal not destroy Isaiah? Like we were saying, how did Isaiah not get destroyed in this scene? And how do we relate with what's happening with now the water of baptism? I think that is kind of interesting, this fire analogy going on with Isaiah 6. And now we have this celebration that we just saw with water. So talk to us about some of the parallels that you're seeing.
Yeah. I mean, I just couldn't help but think, he's setting us up for like, he's about to die, right? Yeah. Like, okay. I'm a sinner. This God is going to kill me. He's standing in front of a tsunami. It's coming at him.
And you're thinking, oh my goodness,
he's about to die. And He's like, and my eyes have seen the Lord. It's almost like there's no going back. It's like, it reads like, right, in the kind of a negative context, it's like you go and witness some brutal like crime, and like the burglar or whoever makes eye contact with you, and you're like, and I saw his face. It's like, he knows I was here. We made eye contact. It's like, I'm dead, right? And then one of these scary angels grabs like a meteor, right? Like, this burning coal, is it like a Kingsford briquette? Like, he grabs like a meteor from this, like, and all of a sudden this giant meteor is coming at Isaiah's face, right? So like, that's like double down. That's his perspective. Like, sure, like in retrospect, there was a tongs, and he brought like, picture like a little angel, this is the size of a bee, like fluttering down and like kissing him.
I can't
it's
escape the barbecue imagery now.
No, it just feels like, I have to imagine, based on the foreshadowing in this text, it's like, and then a flaming rock was coming, left the throne of God, and was being hurled at my face. Like, he's about to die. Like, the meteor is going to hit his face, and that's it. It's over. Mm-hmm. And yet, so I think it's important. It's like God's judgment is coming towards him, and it's not thwarted, right? Like, it could be like, but then God said, stop. And the angel stopped. The meteor fell from the sky like a bullet in a Superman movie or something, like it's not that. It's like, it touches his face. Like, he tastes judgment. And then God declares, like, you've tasted judgment. You've been made clean. And so it's like this interesting, judgment was meant for him. It was coming for him. He tasted it. And so like, there's this symbolic aspect of that, of like, hey, that's his punishment. Like, he tasted judgment. Like, there's this part where it's like, well, like, you stand before a judge who's like, you've committed a heinous crime. You deserve to go to jail. And the judge knows like, hey, I'm going to extend some clemency. And so he's like, hey, your fine is $5 American. Like, wait, what? It's like, well, that's your punishment. It feels like obviously more weighty than that. But I think on one hand, just looking at the story by itself, he tastes judgment, and it's like a near death experience. Like, it's like he comes out with a scar. What's this scar? It's like, dude, I stood before God. I thought I was going to die. He hurled a meteor at my face and he stopped it. It just touched my lips and then it fell to the ground. And he's like, hey, get out of here. It's like, there's a scared straight like thing about that. But then if you look at it in the kind of the lens of all of scripture, it becomes a motif, right? We use this word motif a lot on the podcast, which means like it's a recurring pattern of something that happens where it's like Jesus on the cross has the hurling wrath of God coming at him and he does die. And yet the author of Hebrews refers to that moment. It says he tasted death on our behalf. So it's like he did die, but he actually just died for a couple of days, which is terrible and great and mighty and wonderful. But it's like he didn't die. Like I guess he died, but he didn't die and go to hell for eternity. He died and then he rose again. So it almost feels like this Isaiah experience is almost like a proto resurrection experience where it's like he tasted death and then was restored unto life. And this meteor that was sent to destroy him actually became God's refining fire that purified him. And so I think part of it is the character and nature of God is like, you deserve judgment. And this God is powerful enough, wise enough, and in charge enough that he can say, you know what? You deserve punishment. And he doesn't say, but I'm not going to give it to you. He's like, I really think that I can restore you and give you a second chance. And I think if you taste punishment that doesn't take you down, you'll be able to be restored. So God makes, as a judge, kind of this judgment call of, I'm going to restore you. I'm going to send you back out there to serve me now, And so I think there's part of it. I think there's also this marked piece of it where it's, think of like a science fiction book or something where it's like, you come into contact with someone and they could kill you, but instead they like mark you with their insignia and say, instead of killing you, I'm going to make you part of my family. Now you serve me. Like he's been bought into this family. And so anyway, to bring up the baptism piece, it's like, and that's baptism too, right? It's like you get grabbed by somebody and we drown you, right? Like and the symbol of baptism is death. You're being buried under the water. Burial underwater is death by drowning. We drown you in the water. You taste death and then you come back up again. And it's not like we could kill you if you want, but we didn't. It's really no, you died. Your life is hidden with Christ in God. You resurrected like he resurrected, and you resurrected unto a new life. And so this, in a sense, reads like an Isaiah conversion experience where he's baptized, he dies, he comes back to live a new life, forgiven, washed clean, purified by the refiner's fire, instead of destroyed by the great king's meteor. He is purified by the refiner's fire, and it's God's prerogative to make that decision.
What I find interesting is the motif, for lack of a better word, theme of the lips here. So it says that he is a man of unclean lips. I live among a people of unclean lips. And of course, it's the lips that this flying meteor. I've gone from Kingsford to flying meteor now.
I don't know the size of this thing. Did it start big, get small? I don't know.
But it touches the lips very importantly. And I think that leads into where this passage goes, because all of a sudden he's being commissioned to go get sent out. So in verse 8, he hears a voice. He heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" And I said, "Here am I, send me." So it's very fascinating that he has this experience. He's touched, and it reminds me of the people in the baptismal tank on Sunday, where as soon as those people go under, it's like they have a story to tell. They had a story to tell as soon as they stepped into faith. Some of their testimonies were so powerful, and I love that this passage in Isaiah goes from, hey, here's the experience that I had from almost death to life in this symbolic way. And now I have an amazing story to tell. I can imagine Isaiah going and telling that story of like, man, I faced the tsunami. I faced this coal, and all of a sudden it touched me, and I'm good now. Like, it's
and imagine
good news.
imagine if there wasn't a coal touching experience, right? Like, Isaiah walks in the throne room of God. He sees the grandeur of God, and he thinks to himself, "Oh my gosh, like I'm going to die. Like I'm a terrible sinner, and I'm not going to stand in the presence of our God." And God thunders out and says, "Who will go for me?" And he's like, "I'm in." It's like, who is this guy, right? Like who, like we as the reader, like we, in terms of like literary criticism, like this is we get to see into the mind of the narrator here, and we know that he's not qualified to go out. Like he's a hypocrite. Like he shouldn't be saying, like when God says, "Who shall I send?" He should say, "With all due respect, you're going to have to choose someone else because I'm not qualified or worthy to stand in here." Like, but something happened that makes it like, we don't feel that. Like when he says that, it's like, no, you know what, whatever that was, it's over. And he's a changed man. And so I think it is also brilliant to be reminded that one moment with God can completely change the trajectory of your entire life. And it's like, I've had people saying like, man, it just stinks I became a Christian, and now my family thinks I'm a hypocrite because like I was such a terrible person last week, and I'm having a hard time explaining to them like I'm different now. It's like, that's a real thing. It's like you have an encounter with Jesus and you're different now. I talked to a mom last week who said, man, my son went to summer camp. He was going through a real hard time, went to summer camp, came home, and he's totally different. She's like, but I'm a mom. I'm not like, overly optimistic. I'm like, I'll see how many days he's like cleans up his act. She's like, I'm on like day 13. Like he's still like just a different kid than I sent to camp. I don't know what's going on here. It's like, and she knows, right? There's a chance he's just trying real hard and like hasn't had a real transformation. But she also knows that God is real. There's a chance he had a genuine encounter with God that transformed him in an instant. That it's not like he's going to have to work real hard to become a better person. Like something fundamentally changed because of an encounter with God. And that's a thing that happens. And so I do think that coal moment is a reminder that, that an encounter with God can transform us. It's also in the story, the function of that moment is like, this isn't Isaiah being two-faced, who like, he's really a sinner, but he just volunteered to go for God. Like, oh no, I wonder what's going to happen. It's like, it doesn't read like that. It reads like, wow, like all of that, it's over. Like he's forgiven in an instant. What happened to this guy?
That moment really solidifies in a lot of people's lives. Even when we come to faith, I think we all have that like, all right, am I good enough still? Like, I feel like I've come to Jesus and I've received his forgiveness, but like, what about that past guy, that past girl or whoever you are out there? And you're always looking back and that's why I think the baptism ceremony is so important. It's like, I can look back at that ceremony and like from then on out, it changed my entire trajectory, and I could hold on to that ceremony just like Isaiah could hold on to that coal moment. And so I want to tie this into the "Here am I" refrain, because that seems to be the most popular one in this Isaiah text. And it kind of reminds you of almost the Hall of Fame of the Bible in a lot of ways. So you have Abraham, God, when he tests Abraham says, "Here I am." When Jacob falls asleep in a dream, God calls out Jacob. He answers, "Here I am." You go down the list. Like when God appears to Moses in the burning bush, he says, "Here I am." One of my favorite stories, Samuel. The Lord calls Samuel, and 3 times he goes to the wrong person saying, "Here I am," the prophet Eli. But Eli says, "You need to go back into your room because it's actually God speaking to you." And so he eventually says, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." In other words, "Here I am." So you get all these figures in the scriptures that like you look at them and man, like these are the heroes of the faith. Like these are the heroes of the faith that are saying, "Here I am, send me." You get Isaiah in this mix, like, "Here I am, send me." Isaiah wrote a 66 chapter book in the scriptures. Like maybe you're out there thinking, I don't know if I would respond that way. I don't know if I would say, "Here am I." And I don't know if I'm qualified, right? I'm still looking back to that moment. I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm still trying to figure out my life before I voluntarily raise my hand and say, "Here I am." If you're a person out there thinking that, where should you find yourself in this Isaiah story? Where should you find yourself within these stories of all these people saying, "Here I am"? Like, is that us? when we come to faith, is that us?
Well, I love Here I Am because there's not much required of you. It's like you're just sharing your location. Like I'm right here, but I do think it's spiritually significant that the first time this question is asked or not answered is Genesis 3, where Adam and Eve fall into sin. And while they're in a place of sin, God comes down to meet with them and he says, where are you? Right. And it should be, here I am. Right. But it's not, because they're in their sin. Adam says, I heard you walking in the garden. I was afraid, so I was hiding. And I do think it seems like there's two postures we can have towards God. We are ashamed and hiding, or we are present and ready for service. And I do think it's probably that binary where it's like, well, what else are you going to say besides here I am, he says, send me. So there is a little something else, but I think that's where it starts is, I think if we're trying to evaluate our own lives, I think that's a fundamental question we can use to evaluate is, am I hiding from God, or am I actively present with God, even with my sin? Because Isaiah finds himself present with God against his volition. He got swept into the presence of God, became aware that he should be hiding, but had nowhere to hide. And his encounter with God was one that purified him. And when God said, where are you? He was able to raise his hand and be like, I'm right here and I'm ready to go. And so there's an implicit invitation to come into the presence of God. There's a reminder that when you find yourself in an encounter with God, when you come with a contrite heart, confessing your sin, he will make you right. And then when he asks where you are, you can hold your head high and raise your hand and say, I'm right here and I'm here to serve you. Not because you're worthy of being in his presence, but because he's made you worthy. The only thing you could do to mess all that up is try to hide from him, because Adam couldn't hide from him. But don't stop the hiding. Come out of the hiding. And when you come to God and say, you confess your sin, he is faithful and just. He will forgive us of our sin and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. That's what God does continuously when we make ourselves available to him.
Yeah. And that second part, like you said, there's a little bit more than here am I. The second part, send me. And I love that we use this message to transition into a series that we're talking about what it means to share our faith, what it means to live with the hope that is within us and be able to share that with people, to come out of hiding, proverbially. And so we see Isaiah and the mission, and you would think like, okay, he's going to get sent on a mission. It's going to be great. Like it's going to be a icing on the cake sort of story. But we run into some interesting obstacles immediately. God says in verse 9, go and tell this people, be ever hearing, but never understanding. Be ever seeing, but never perceiving. Make the heart of this people calloused. Make their ears dull and close their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn and be healed. Man, there's so much in there. I immediately think of trying to interpret this. There's a lot about blindness and deafness in the book of Isaiah, talking about just this rebellious people. And yet I think the important place to turn is where this passage often gets referenced, and it's in the New Testament. Jesus brings out this passage after he's talking in parables. He says, you will indeed hear but never understand, and you will indeed see but never perceive. For this people's heart has grown dull, and with their ears they can barely hear. Their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their heart and turn, and I would heal them, Jesus says. Or in John, he's doing all these works, and John 12 kind of recaps and says, some people still aren't believing. And then in John 12, they quote this and say, nevertheless, many even of the authorities believe in him, but for fear of the Pharisees, they did not confess it, so that they would not be put out of the synagogue. For they love the glory that comes from man more than the glory that comes from God. And so it's just really interesting that God would set somebody on a mission knowing that there was going to be blindness, deafness, and then I'm really struck by verse 10 that says, make the heart of this people calloused. It's almost like he's saying, Isaiah, I'm inviting you into this process, but in this process, you're actually going to make people's heart calloused. And so it's kind of like this, there's a passive aspect to it, and there's an active aspect that Isaiah gets into. So all that being said, my skeptic question this week.
Oh, here
comes
we
from
go.
the Christian listening. So it's a Christian skeptic question.
Wow, okay.
In church, in house. Okay, so God knows that this message is going to fall on deaf ears, right? When I'm sent, there might be something that happens. It's going to fall on deaf ears. And yet, you would think, if that's the case, God's command to me would be, go and change these people's minds, right? Go and convince them. Go and win them over. That's the language we use a lot of these days, like winning somebody over. But in reality, Isaiah is invited to this participation of hardening people's hearts. And so I'm imagining Christians looking at this same dilemma today, saying, okay, I live in the East Bay area. I'm being sent out. It feels like I can already guess what's going to happen, where this is just going to fall on deaf ears. So why even go anyway, right? Why get sent? We're in this faith sharing series. We're getting ready for it. We're going to get sent into the East Bay, where we know there's a lot of people that are blind, that are deaf, that don't know their right hand from their left. So how do we faithfully go about this sending? Like we've raised our hand, here I am, send me. How do we faithfully do it without being so downtrodden on the results and so focused on the results?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for us to kind of read between the lines and realize that what God is not asking Isaiah to do is to go out and like actively try to convince these people to not follow God. Like, don't go out and preach a real bad sermon so that people will ignore you, right? He's really not talking about the quality. It's like there's a lot of sarcasm in this passage, right? Like, otherwise they would turn and get forgiven like you, right? It's like, hey, listen, like, I'm going to send you out there, and these people do need to hear. They're going to be accountable for how they live their lives. We got to warn them, but just so you know, like, no one's gonna listen to you. Like, this community of people, their hearts are so hard. They're not going to learn. They're not going to turn. Like, just be prepared for that. But this is the mission, right? And I think it's important to compare that with another story from the 8th century, the story of Jonah. And so Jonah is called to Nineveh, which is what the capital of Assyria. So these are God's enemies who are about to come and take down the northern kingdom in that same century. Right. And God's like, listen, I want you to go and let Assyria know that I'm coming for them. Like, I'm bringing judgment. And Jonah's like, no, I don't want to do it. And so he hides, he runs away, the story, and then gets spit out by this fish in Nineveh. He gets up there and he preaches the worst sermon, right? Like, I could just imagine he's just like 40 days, then it'll be overturned. Just like preaching judgment, whatever. And everyone repents. Everyone turns to God, from the highest to the greatest. They all repent. We're so sorry. God forgives them. And Jonah's furious. Right? He's like, I knew it. Like, that's why I didn't want to come and preach judgment, because I knew you weren't going to judge them. I knew that if they said they're sorry, you're going to like redeem them, restore them. Like, I know that, and this is his sarcasm. Like, I know that you're quick to forgive and you're a compassionate God. I hate it. I just want you to judge my enemies. And we learn the same lesson in an opposite way in the book of Jonah, which is, listen, we are just faithful to go out and share the word of God, and the results are up to God. And so I think it's important to look at these stories together and say, you know what, like, who knows the condition of people's hearts? We go out there, we share the hope that's within us with folks. And sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, I need this. I'm going to come to faith. Don't be like Jonah, who's like, what? Oh man, I don't want this person. Like, be excited. Sometimes you're going to share it and people are like, no, thank you. I don't want this. Please don't bring your religion on me. It's like, okay, well, there's something beautiful that happens when we disconnect ourselves from the need for results. And I think that's, for me, for a long time, that was the hardest thing with this idea of sharing my faith with people, is I felt like I have to be a good gospel salesman. Like, I got to figure out how to close the deal. I got to convince people, right? Like, I got to be prepared to give an answer for all their questions. And now I'm just kind of like, you know what? The human heart is the thing that indicates whether they're ready for this message or not. The Spirit is the one who's working on that heart or not. I think of an analogy sometimes of like picking fruit off a fruit tree. It's like, you go and start tugging on fruit. Sometimes they're ripe and they come right off. Other times, like, you can't get the orange off the tree and it's like, all right, not ready yet. It's like, that's what faith sharing is like. Is like, you're going out there and you're just starting a conversation. You're, hey, you go to church around here? Like, oh no, I would never go to church. Like, okay. And it's like, if you're a bold person, you're like, oh wow, tell me more about that. Like, that's an interesting conversation. Most of us are like, never mind. But God uses all of that, right? Like, talk to people all the time. They're like, oh man, somebody came. I feel bad for them. They tried to share their faith with me. I shut them down. I told them I was an atheist. I didn't want to hear anymore. But I just said that because I've got so much pain and I am seeking God. And who knows, right? Like, and so part of it's like, we're not pushy, because we can't change hearts. We can't change minds. We carry this hope with us. And I think one of the encouragements I get is like, we're not living in the 8th century BC. We're living in a different time and place, a time on the other side of the Great Commission where the Holy Spirit has come, and the mission of God is to go and bring in those who are turning to him. And so it's like, go out and proclaim the good news, and anyone who wants to jump into this ship and escape the flood that is to come is welcome to join, right? Like we're Noah saying there's a flood coming, come on in. Everybody's invited. And so there is a little bit of a freedom of like, hey, not everyone's going to want to go get in Noah's ark, but all are invited, right? Come on in, let's join it. And so there's freedom that comes by realizing that, you know what? My job is to do what God told me to do, share the hope within me. The results are absolutely up to him. I couldn't change him if I wanted to. And so there's freedom, not merely discouragement, although I'm sure it'd be hard to be Isaiah and preach for years and no one listens.
Yeah, I think this is really relieving, especially considering our area. Like there's this reputation that we get in the East Bay that it's like really difficult to be a Christian, even to share your faith or share that hope that lies within you, because it just so often falls on deaf ears. Nobody wants it. And like, it just becomes discouraging because you think it's like a me problem, but like the fruit analogy of like trying to tug on the tree and like, oh, maybe it's not ripe yet. Maybe the Lord's not
and
working.
part of it's like, you don't even know. So I just think more and more, especially in our culture, it's like everyone is like struggles with like identity issues in terms of like, who am I? What do I believe? I don't know. Like there's so many different worldviews out there. And, it used to be like, I would talk to people like, oh, that person's never going to want to become a Christian. And then I'm surprised when they become a Christian. The longer I live, the more I'm like, you don't know, I met somebody the other day who was like cussing up a storm. Like everything about them indicated that they're probably not a believer in Jesus. But it's like, I've been around the block enough to like recognize that like, that doesn't mean anything. Like, and sure enough, this person's like, oh my gosh, you work at the church. Like, that's awesome. Like I consider myself a Christian person. I'm like, well, I wonder, like, there's some discipleship that needs to happen there, obviously, because I don't think you really understand Christianity, or at least there's something off here. But I'm like, it just makes me think, you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if that person finds out what I do, finds out what we do in our community, wants to jump in with us, and has remarkable transformation almost overnight, because it's just like, you find out, man, all of this language and content and all the aspect of this life that you were living before, it wasn't because you were passionate about being a R-rated person or whatever. It's like, you just struggle with, who am I? How do I fit in? And it's like, then you find life in a community where people live differently. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is, it's like, if they're not faking it, it's like they could finally be their real selves for the first time. So I think I'm a little less judgy than I was before, because it's like, you don't know what's happening in someone's heart. You're going to see what God does.
And kind of going back to Vision Sunday last week and just thinking about how the Lord is on the move. It's like, hey, something's happening. Something's happening in our area where people are coming to faith and having that awakening to the need, or the deep-seated needs in their life. So just an encouragement out there. It's just like, hey, our call is to be faithful and leave the results up to God in a lot of ways. So the passage continues by saying, "For how long, Lord?" Isaiah asks. And God answers, "Until the cities lie ruined and without inhabitant, until the houses are left deserted and the fields ruined and ravaged, until the Lord has sent everyone far away and the land is utterly forsaken." So clearly God has a plan here. Clearly God has something in mind. And so we look at passages like Leviticus 26 or Deuteronomy 28, and what you'll find is passages that outline what's going to happen if people are unfaithful to the covenant that God is setting up. And a lot of it lines up with this, like the cities will lie ruined, people will be exiled, all these different punishments that get laid on to God's unfaithful people in this context. And so I'm thinking about how to translate this into our conversation, even talking about today. And we just got done talking about failures and attempting to share that hope and share the gospel with somebody and having it not well received. It seems to be Isaiah's MO here, and like his mission is to go and share this gospel, go and share the good news of God's grace and glory, even though it's going to get rejected. And so for purposes of encouragement, as we lead into this series where people might be feeling having that feeling of, man, if I go, it's going to be rejected. My question is, how might the Lord use these rejections for his kingdom purposes? Because it seems like what is happening here is God's people are rejecting what he's saying, and yet it still seems like he's got a beautiful purpose underneath it. So what would you say to people that are worried about rejection, and how could God use rejection toward his kingdom purposes?
Yeah, I mean, I think God uses rejection in all sorts of ways. I think on one hand, rejection is like subjective. So we talk to people who it's like, man, I feel so bad, right? I told the story a second ago. I feel so bad. Somebody came and shared their faith with me, and I shut them down. I made fun of them in public, and I think they walked away dejected. And yet I knew it's like what they were saying was true. Like, and I was just putting up a wall because I didn't want to hear it. And 6 months later, I found myself like on my knees asking Christ to transform my life. And he did. It's like, it felt like rejection. This like person, whoever shared with them has no idea, but it's not necessarily rejection. Sometimes like the volatile reaction is part of God's plan to soften and break down the walls of their heart. Other times it's like we find people in different stages. Like we're, this idea of like, was it, I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God made it grow, that we see in the New Testament epistles. It's like, we're all doing our different part. And so it's like, if somebody's heart is this like wall of stone, and we're like sharing our faith, and it's like we're hoping that it penetrates the stone, like you might crack the shell like an egg, but it doesn't break. The next person comes and shares, and it does. So it's like, who knows what part you're playing. And then two, I think the fear of rejection is implicit in any important endeavor. Like, I think there's nothing that's worth doing that's easy. Right? Whether because of spiritual warfare or the fall, or it's like, if it's, I don't know, there's just something about the nature of it too, of just like, if it's easy, we don't even, who cares? It's not even important, And so I can't think of anything in this life that's like super easy. It's like you raise children, be like, yeah, I wanted to raise children, but then like my kid, I told him to eat its dinner and it didn't want to eat its dinner. It's like, yeah, that's parenting. Like parenting is taking the raw materials of a human and helping cultivate them to become like a fine human being. Like it's hard work, because the inclination of everything in our world is to rebel against that. And so I think the possibility of rejection does not mean we should not do it. It's exactly why we should do it. And I think anything that's worth doing in our world is going to have rejection over and over and over again. And part of it, like with parenting, it's like you got to learn how to not have your heart be broken every time your kid says, I don't like this dinner, for example, but instead, and also not overreact to it, but just be like, all right, this is part of the process. How are we going to help this kid become a good new food trier or whatever it is, right? That's true with everything we put our hand to do. And so I think the same is true with, again, I'm not saying to be pushy, like go to your neighbor and like, oh, I don't want to go to church. I'm going to come back next week though. I'm going to ask you again. It's like, sometimes you give people some space, right?
Yeah.
Same way you give your kids some space. But I think recognizing like they're at this point not interested in this message. They might not understand it. They might not be ready for it. And they might be someone who's never going to be ready for it, but that doesn't mean anything. Like it's because at the same time, there's the sarcasm in this passage. Otherwise they might turn and be forgiven. It's like, I wonder if Isaiah has a sliver of hope where he's like, okay, God is saying, I'm going to go out there and share this message and no one's going to listen. But like, we both know it just happened to me. Like if they say sorry, he's going to change his mind. Like he's going to relent from bringing forth the calamity on their life because he loves to forgive. And so if I'm Isaiah, I'm like, I'm just going to pray that these people do listen. And like, it's like, hey, I know what I'm getting into. Like the default position of the human heart is always evil all the time. Like I get that. But who knows, right? Like it worked for Jonah, like it might work for me. And I think as we read this as readers from a distance, we get to see the juxtaposition between Jonah and Isaiah, where it's like, yeah, the worst sinner turns to Christ or turns to God, forgiven instantly. God's own people, they reject him enough. Eventually he's like, all right, well, if that's what you want, like you're going to have to face my punishment for this. But we also know like if they would just turn, everything would change. Everything would change instantly. And so it's like at the end of the day, you don't walk away from seeing the judgment of God on the people of God and be like, why God, why? It's like, I mean, it's because they didn't, like he tried so often. I mean, that's the story of Jesus. Like I sent prophet after prophet. You killed all of my prophets. You killed my kid when I sent you my son. Like you murdered him in cold blood. Like, and yes, I'm here to forgive you if you're like, but like you deserve punishment for sure. Right. Like that's just what these people are, just like monsters. It's just gobbling up all of these people sent to bring them life. And God is still like, hey, but if you're ever ready, like I want to redeem you, but I can't, I'm not going to make you.
Yeah. It sounds like in order to get, because I know like fear of rejection can be pretty debilitating, right? It can be very numbing, and it can set you off the mission or off the Great Commission of not wanting to share with anybody because you don't want to face that pain. It sounds like from what you just said, in order to combat that, it's to think bigger. Think of the entire narrative of, hey, this could be one instance where down the road, maybe 6 months from now, like none of us know the future. So like 6 months from now, something could change. 10 years from now, that interaction that you had could transform somebody, and then somebody else can come in along, and another person in the family comes along, and it's just, you just never know.
Yeah. And I think there's a flip side of that too, where it's like you think bigger and you realize like, hey, I'm just a part of this process. But I think once you realize you're just a part of this process, you stop feeling that pressure to close the deal today with these people. So it's like you meet somebody new on an airplane, and it's like, if you're feeling the pressure, you're like, okay, I got 1 hour before I get to Long Beach, and I got to find a way to get into a conversation, ask them where their faith is in Jesus, share with them the 4 spiritual laws, ask them to pray, and then help them connect to the local church if they say yes.
A lot of pressure. Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure, right? And so it's like, if you go into that airplane, you're like, hey, I'm just a part of this process.
Yeah.
You're less under the gun, and you're more curious. Where, if you sit down with a person and you're like, hey man, good to see you. Where are you heading off to today? And they're like, I don't really want to talk today. Okay. Right. And like, pray like, God, if you want this person to talk to me, whatever. Or like, oh, I'm going to Long Beach. Oh, you from there? Oh, cool. Where your kids go to school? Like, oh, I got a kid that goes to Cal Baptist. Like, oh, wow. Are you guys like church people or something? Like, oh, not really. She just found the school. Like, oh, that's interesting. How does she like it? And you're just like wondering, like, is this conversation going to turn to a place where it'd be really organic to just talk about things of faith? And it's like, and you're cooperating with the Spirit and saying like, hey, I'm here. If you want to use me to bring up some kind of kingdom conversation, I'm all in, looking for inroads. But I feel like I used to go into those conversations being like, oh my gosh, I got to find a way to say like, so have you exerted faith in Jesus Christ to be your Lord and Savior? And it's like, and some people I know do that and it works for them. Like for me, it's so scary to just cross that divide, because I find it can shut off conversations so quickly that I've had more success with curiosity. Just like, hey, yeah, you from around here? What are you doing for work? That's awesome. Like, and it's like, and if I get bold, I'm like, oh, you go to church around here or anything? Or like, hey, whatever. Or they ask me, what do I do? It's actually pretty rare somebody asks me what I do. It's just bonkers, right? Because like, that's the first question you ask everybody. Yeah. No one ever asked me. So I just feel like that's God putting this like hedge of protection around me. Because once the jig is up at that point, sometimes we're good, sometimes we're bad. And so people rarely ask me what I do. And so like, I'm not the guy. I know pastors who are like, oh, I'm a teacher, or like, oh yeah, I'm in sales or something. It's
social work.
I tell them the truth if they ask me. Yeah. It's like, but I'm pastor of a church. And, but for the most part, I also feel like for the most part, most people don't care about other people. So when you're asking them questions about themselves, they're not used to that.
Right.
And they're not asking me questions. They're just excited somebody cares about them. So I just feel like the Spirit shows up even in those conversations, and you look for natural inroads to just say, oh, that's great. Like, oh yeah, my wife was praying the other day for whatever. It's like, oh wow, like, are you guys like religious people or something? It's like, oh no, she just prays a lot. Oh, that's interesting. You're just testing the waters, right? It's like, it's the orange tree and just tugging on different fruit and hoping that one pops off. And if not, it's like, hey, I hope you have a great day. And I was part of that story. Like, it would be fun to meet him in heaven someday and be like, oh my gosh, then I met another guy who I told the real story to,
It's going to be really exciting. All these conversations that we're just having right now that we're unlocking are going to be in the series to come. So you're going to want to tune in. You're going to want to be a part of a group that's going over it. If you do join us on Wednesday nights, we're going over the entire series on sharing the hope that's within you, sharing your faith, sharing the gospel, all these different, deep breaths. It's very relieving to say like, hey, I'm a part of this. I'm just going to partner with the Spirit and be curious, ask good questions, and genuinely care about people and where they're at. So I think the second thing that stood out to me in what you were saying is holding on to the hope of how powerful and life-changing repentance is. Because the passage in Isaiah 6 ends like this: It says, and though a tenth remains in the land, so it's like that sliver of hope again, a tenth remains in the land, it will again be laid waste. But as the terebinth and oak leave stumps when they are cut down, so the holy seed will be the stump in the land. So Isaiah 6 ultimately ends with hope. And I love this because even in Leviticus 26, where it's like laying down all those punishments that, hey, if you go awry in this covenant, like this is going to happen. It's going to be bad for the land, bad for the people. It's going to be a wasteland. And then in verse 40, it says, but if they confess their iniquity and the iniquity of their fathers, if they confess, if they come back to me, then I will remember my covenant with Jacob, and I will remember my covenant with Isaac, my covenant with Abraham. And so God wants that repentance to come back. And so could you fill us in on what eventually happens? Because this is our only dip into Isaiah. What eventually happens after the Assyrian exile, after the Babylonian exile, that fulfills this prophecy that a holy seed will be the stump in the land?
Yeah, I think so remember, this is southern kingdom. So the northern kingdom's captured into Assyria and just scattered kind of to the wind. Southern kingdom, 612 BC, the Babylon comes in, takes them over, and brings them back to Babylon. They live in exile in Babylon for 70 years. And then in the 500s, like 539, there's a new king in town, Cyrus of Persia, who has this edict that says, hey, anyone who's in Babylonian captivity can go home. And so these waves of Israelites start to go back home, the ones who want to, who long to be back in the homeland. And so it's like this guy Zerubbabel leads the charge of this first wave. We see Ezra goes back and like wants to rebuild the temple. Nehemiah goes back, wants to rebuild the wall. There's this idea that like there's a remnant, like something can come of this. And so in this like tree stump imagery, it's almost like there's this moment in the movie where it's like this mighty tree. It's like Avatar. So like this mighty tree gets like cut down, and it's like, well, it's over, right? Like it's over. And then 70 years later, it's almost like you see this like stem coming up from the trunk. It's like there's still life in there. Like this is going to become a tree again. And so, then we kind of move into this next Second Temple period of like, well, it's not the same. It's not the same. Like we still need, our hearts are still wrong. And then we get Jesus. So I don't want to spoil anything, but Jesus comes 400 years later. But yeah, I think that's how we see that manifest. And like even Jesus is referred to as like a stump from the root of Jesse, right? This idea that from this Davidic line, like something will grow, and it'll grow and take over the entire earth with this tree that's branches, inhabit all species, and give shade and beauty and verdancy to the world. So they're fallen, but they're coming back. It's the same meta narrative of creation, fall, redemption, and then the kingdom of God spreading throughout the earth.
Yeah, and I love that because it's so hopeful, right? This rejection that you might face in this moment turns into something really hopeful that ultimately lands on Jesus. And in the same way, as we embark on this new series on sharing your faith, there might be instances where you do feel that rejection, and yet we are always full of hope. Like Christians are hopeful people. And so could you just give us a little insight onto what's next?
Yeah, we're going to walk through this series just really kind of reimagining this whole concept of faith sharing that we've talked about. That, hey, what if it's not gospel sales? What if instead we have this hope within us and it's contagious? And so what does that mean to look at our work in a different way? What does that mean to look at our relationships in a different way? What does that mean to step into conversations like we've talked about? And so really trying to change our minds a little bit around what it looks like to be people who bring the hope that's in us out into the world. And so this Isaiah 6 passage teaches us kind of as we kick off the series here, that it kind of starts and ends with worship. As we meet God, encounter him ourselves, eventually he's going to ask us the question, well, who will go for me? Who will go and share this message with the world outside the doors? And we don't even know what it means, but it's like, well, obviously I'm right here. Like I'm in. And so, here we are. And so next week we're going to jump in and just start talking about how God calls us to look at our life and work on this planet in a different way from Matthew chapter 4 and a number of other passages.
And it's awesome just thinking about how we get to worship the Lord and how that worship just draws us deeper and deeper into relationship with him. And ultimately, when we are sent, we carry that hope within us that Peter references. And so looking forward to how to share that hope that is within you in just some more organic ways, so we can all take a breath and not have to feel like a salesman. So, yeah. Pastor Danny, looking forward to it.
Can't wait.